This week on episode 3 of Chit Chat, we discuss intellectual property and board gaming. We dust off some classics while Jeremy is still playing 7th Continent, and take a look at some viewer comments and do our best to address them. Welcome back to Chit Chat. This is our 3rd episode, and as always, we have Ryan, gonna start down here this week, Gary, myself, and Jeremy Salinas. Jeremy?
Oh, I got my last name, thank you.
Yeah, Jeremy gets the last name.
Cool, thank you.
What are we going to start talking about?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about IPs, intellectual property. It's something that someone has created and uses and licenses out to other people. We're going to be talking about IPs in board games.
Yeah, and whether they're good or not.
Yeah.
Whether there's a good examples. All sorts of things, really.
Yeah.
So
Actually, let me talk about why it's so important to license, or why publishers acquire IPs in the first place. Now, creating an IP requires a huge amount of internal and external resources, right? Yeah. So that's why a lot of companies, and you see a lot of board games, not just board games, but video games, anything, books that take those, bedspreads that take those, they take that audience and they use it for something else they've created. That's why people license them out. That's why you see things like Breaking Bad. Like, people are like, Breaking Bad board game, why would they do that? Well, it's because they have a giant built-in audience of people. So, as you said, we're going to be talking about what we feel are good IPs and how they translate over. And it's not just about whether or not the IP is good, it's whether it translates and makes good gameplay and it captures the theme of that intellectual property that they're pulling from.
Yeah, so I'm going to start out with a bit of a history lesson.
Uh-oh.
So these all started because back in the day, I mean, this was a lot of gaming. When we were kids, a lot of games. I remember who played the original, well, you guys probably didn't, the Star Wars board game, like Escape from the Death Star. This was a board game, but it's just a horrible roll and move board game that happened to have the Star Wars license. And I think my opinion is I'm very skeptical whenever I see one of these games. I mean, I'll never look at a licensed game and think, oh, I bet it's good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just skeptical of it because there's so much of a rich history of them not being very good.
Yeah.
However, like you said, that's changed as people who are designing games today, maybe that are our age, grew up with properties that they loved, and they may also happen to be a board game designer. Like, I'm looking at you, Eric Lang. Like, I think The Godfather, obviously, is a very recent and great example of a really good game. It has a great property attached to it, and they work together really well.
That's a very interesting title, too, because The Godfather is now, 40 years old? It came out in the 70s?
At least.
It's interesting that they would pull from that title, being that it's such an old movie, and the target audience of those people are now in their 40s and 50s and even 60s that watched that originally.
Yeah, well, although it's a classic, I mean, that is kind of a unique one that it's like everyone...
But so is Gone with the Wind. And, I mean, that's a classic, but it doesn't translate well into a board game.
Well, no, sure. I think those things start, at least today, I'm hoping that they start with people appreciating a property at a certain level where they see the kind of mechanics that can, translate to.
Well, I think some of it is, is it a good game?
Yeah.
Because you're skeptical because, okay, you're just tacking it on.
Well, and they often have.
And they do, and they often have. And The Godfather, Eric Lang's Godfather, doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the movie other than maybe your horsehead starting token, but it's a good game.
Yeah.
It's got a good gameplay, and you tack on that theme on top of it. I get it. I know what I'm getting into, and it really helps that game. Whereas there's other games where I think they're trying to fit the theme of whatever the IP is, and it just doesn't work out very well.
As good as The Godfather is as a game, you're right. I think it is more of an abstract pull from the license. It doesn't feel like The Godfather. You're not representing any of the main characters from the game.
Well, but it's mafia-based.
It's mafia-based.
Which I think that's better.
But on the other end of the spectrum,
the
the games I want to talk about, there's 3 things that very specifically I want to talk about. Movies and TV, books, and then the last one is video games. And I picked 3 titles that I felt not only are incredible board games, but they capture that theme of those 3 licenses perfectly. And the first one I want to talk about was Battlestar Galactica, which is a TV series. And it's a heavy game. It takes about 3 to 4 hours to play. But it's a perfect representation of what that show is for those people that have watched it in a board game form. And have you guys played it?
I've
Yeah,
never
oh,
played
yeah,
it.
I
I love
played
it.
it.
Okay,
It is,
you
you're
played
right.
it.
But I've
It's
watched
the show.
the show growing up. It's
Yes.
a great show.
Yeah. Have you watched the new show or the original
The
show?
original, and
You
seen
have
some
to
of
watch
the
the new one.
Yeah,
This is definitely
this is
more based on the new
revolves
show.
around the new one
newer
because it is a
version.
deduction game,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and it feels
someone's
like
asylum.
it feels just like watching the show.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah, it's a perfect representation of that license. The other two, one was War of the Ring, which is based off the novel, and then I had Sid Meier's Civilization, which is based off a video game. All of those games are really good games just in and of themselves, but they also are really good thematic representations of the game. They take those core mechanics, the way you feel when you play that video game, the way that you feel when you read that novel, and they're represented in that IP license.
Yeah, I would say Sid Meier, the Civilization game, might be a little bit of a cheat since it's. I mean, when you play that video game, it's kind of like you're playing almost like a board game.
That's true.
I mean,
that's true.
That one works pretty well as it relates to sort of transitioning. But I'm trying to think, what's a really present day bad example, or a more recent one than say like Star Wars?
Like a bad example of like a bad IP?
Yeah, well, no, like licensed games that are just clearly like, oh, that license is huge. Let's crank out a game. I'm sure they probably a dime a dozen. We just don't see
I'll step on some toes here, and I apologize because I know this game was wildly popular, but that's how I felt about the Harry Potter Battle at Hogwarts
really?
deck building game. I was playing it, and I was like, this could not be Harry Potter, and just I might actually.
See, I've heard a lot of
the
good.
same.
I've heard a lot of people
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I think I've heard that it's a little slow in the beginning, but I get the sense that they probably made it that way because they're trying to open up gaming to a broader audience. You know, it's certainly not a. I mean, back in the day, some of those games were just like a company got a license and said, "Hey, designer, do something with this."
Right.
But that still
Right.
happens today.
That's
No,
I mean
sure
that's,
it
that's
does.
what
There's a
I
lot of
feel like
companies that
because
still do that today.
you know that game could have been literally any other IP, and not changed really at all.
And again, that's what I'm talking about. It's taking the marriage of that IP and mixing it with perfect gameplay where the two are synonymous with each other. They make sense for the license that they're pulling from.
I think a great example for me, like from my gameplay, is the Firefly board game, which, I mean, literally everything about that game is thematic to what what the TV show was about. I mean, it's a pick up and deliver. You're upgrading your ship. You're recruiting crew members. Yeah, they could have thrown some generic art and some generic IP, but people would play it. They'd say, this is basically like Firefly.
I feel the same way about FFG's Star Wars Rebellion and FFG's Imperial Assault. Like, I feel like Rebellion is a perfect representation of Star Wars. When you're playing that game, you feel like you're either the Imperials or the Rebel Alliance. However, with Imperial Assault, at least in the way that it is right now, you're playing all these random weird characters that really don't have any tie-in with the license, and it just doesn't feel the same as Star Wars. I mean, it could be Descent for all you're playing.
It
for the most
basically
part.
is Descent.
The gameplay
There's
is
a Star
basically
Wars
Descent.
slapped
It doesn't
on.
feel like Star Wars. It's still a great game, but it's not a perfect marriage between
Well, it's
the
not
gameplay
that perfect sweet
and the
spot
IP.
for
Yes,
sure.
yeah.
That is a rare thing, I think, right?
Well, Rebellion is one of the rarest, I think, in that,
And War of the Ring.
and War of the Ring, in
Ring.
that it's like almost like a perfect spot in the middle.
You know,
Yeah.
another one that comes close, I think, you'd mentioned this, Bloodborne.
Yeah, Bloodborne, the card game from last year, Eric Lang.
Yeah. Mhm.
Again.
Hey, talk about abstract though. That's
Abstract. Yeah, you know, it's not really a whole lot about the video game you're going to get out of the card game, but it takes the key components of that video game, and that's a game you can get in and you can get out, because most of these IP games I've noticed, they're long.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're big.
Yeah.
And Bloodborne, you're dealing with the blood tokens. You're going to die a lot. You're kind of working together, but you're also kind of against each other. He really nailed that theme, and it's a fun game to get in and you can get out fairly quickly.
And that's what I think is a good example, too. Like, what you're getting at is, like, really feeling the characters and the narrative of some
Right.
of these IPs.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas this one, you don't feel the characters and the narrative, but there's enough in there that is reminiscent of the experience of playing the
Yeah,
game.
the same
You're
thing.
like,
that
oh,
push your luck element that's
you're pressing your luck,
inherent
you're
in
dying all the time.
Bloodborne.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's just enough little elements to get people. Same with The Godfather. There's enough elements there to connect the dots
right.
and have a good experience with that license involved.
Right.
Before we move on to the games we've played, just around the table, like if you could pick any one IP for movies, books, TV, whatever, so be it, what would you pick for like a board game
So
that
this is-
hasn't been done before?
This is probably going to be obvious to anybody that knows me. I would take a tactical miniatures game based on Overwatch. I think would be awesome.
Yeah, you're
it's-
in Overwatch.
Well, there's just so
junkie.
many great. Those
Overwatch.
characters
Well,
are
I'll tell you
so
what,
well designed.
as a property, that is
It's
as big as it gets
huge
about
property
these days.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
You know, in terms of, I was thinking like, you know, some of these legacy games and some of these kind of co-ops, but you can also be against each other and maybe even some puzzle aspect. I would like to see Lost.
Yeah.
I think with all the characters in Lost, all the puzzles, you know, trying to figure out what's going on and, you know, how do we get off this thing? I think that'd be a pretty cool
Isn't
IP.
Seventh Continent basically Lost?
Well, that's funny that you say that because there's a lot of games that come out that aren't tied to a license. And I can't even think of it. Seventh Continent, where you're playing it and you go like, oh, this could actually be a Lost game. If they applied the property to that.
Yeah.
That's probably a good example of something someone could seize on.
Yeah. What about you?
Man vs. Meeple, the board game, probably. No.
That would be so boring.
It would be. It would be. I get to edit a video. I know there's Marvel games out there, but with sort of the heightened position that the MCU has going on these days and how big it is, I'd like to see. I mean, there's a whole slew of games that have existed in the Marvel universe. I'd love to see an Imperial Assault style game.
Oh yeah,
wrapped around the Marvel
that would
universe
be awesome.
Because like comic books and those
They lend
storylines
themselves really well to that style of game.
endlessly,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
endlessly, scenario after scenario.
I don't think they've done
Tons of
anything
characters.
with the MCU, like the cinematic
Yeah.
universe at all.
Even the comic books. Like, I'd like to see.
Yeah.
I know there's miniatures games with Marvel characters, like HeroClix and stuff
Sure,
like that,
yeah.
which are great. I want to see good scenario, narrative-driven stories in that universe. That'd be cool.
I've got two, and I'll make the first one really quick. I think everybody would love to have a Zelda, a really good
Yes.
Zelda game. I don't know what it looks like.
I don't know what
Tiny
that
Epic Quest was a pretty
That gets
good
close.
representation,
Pretty close.
but something more epic, obviously,
Right.
in length and
More
and
story-driven.
gameplay. Yes, and
Yeah.
mechanics. But the one I'd really like to see would be like, it's really hard for me to explain in my brain what I'm thinking about, but I love World War II, and I love Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan. I would like to see a game where they use hedgerow battles and tactics and bounding and trying to get into position behind like enemy lines and flanking and doing that in a way that's fun and enjoyable and not just a heavy, you know, chip moving World War II game that you typically see when you see
Not
those
like
style
a
of
typical
games.
war game.
Yes, exactly.
Like a Euro with some.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Band of
something
Brothers
like
would be a
that.
great IP for that.
Band of Brothers would be awesome. Period.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good property. That's a good.
You know, real quick, speaking of World War II, you know, one of my favorite IPs I think would be neat would be The Great Escape. Now, that was a movie.
Oh, yeah.
But a little inside info, there might be a game out there being developed that I know of from The Great Escape. I've played a small prototype, and it has the potential to be really good.
There was a
That guy
game
is-
last year at Gen Con. I don't remember the name. It was a World War II kind of Great Escape, but also there was an old video game called Commandos. I'm not sure if you guys ever played
yeah,
those.
yes.
Yeah.
Commandos was a fantastic isometric game where you're trying to escape and get into enemy lines. That'd be awesome.
That would be cool.
All right, what are we playing?
Yeah, what have you been playing?
What have I
Ryan?
been playing? My wife and I recently got into Seven Wonders Duels. And
Oh, that's right. You mentioned that.
Yeah, and so we've been playing a lot of that.
With the
Yeah, and you-
expansion?
With the expansion.
Oh, you did get the
I
expansion.
did finally get the expansion.
So what
It's
do you
great.
think?
I love it.
Yeah, the expansions. That's one of those expansions where you probably won't play without it.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know why you would ever go back.
Yeah.
It adds a lot to the game.
It's a way better game with the expansion.
Yeah, it is. It gives you more to do on your turn.
Yeah.
Well, it gives you more options for sure. That the whole
More
like avoiding
flexibility.
taking a card thing.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
one thing you
wow.
could never do. You could never strategically avoid
Yep.
taking a card, and
Yeah.
now you can, and it's huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, great. Maybe one of the best two-player games I've ever played.
Oh, yeah, it climbed the charts really fast.
Oh, yeah.
Once it came out. It's only been out what 2 years now.
About
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was 2 years ago. 2 years Gen Con.
What about you? I know you and I've played a few games lately together.
Well, you know, I've been trying to look at other games. I love all the new hotness stuff.
Yeah.
But there's so many games out there. I've only been in the gaming kind of scene, hobby game, maybe 4 or 5 years. And I'm seeing, wow, there's a lot of great games in the last 5-10 years that everybody's stealing the mechanics from that game,
Yeah.
right? But there is, I've come to love Kramer and Kiesling games, okay? And they have one called The Palaces of Carrara. I had not known anything about this. I heard about it. I was flipping through BGG one day. And I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Came out in 2012. It was one of the nominees for the 2013 Kennerspiel. It didn't win. Lost out to Legends of Andor. I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
Probably.
But it is it's got your Carrara is just a region in Italy, and you have marble blocks. There's a little rondel that spins.
Yeah, the picture you sent us pictures of it. The
Yeah.
rondel looks really cool. That's
you pull
intriguing
blocks out of a
anyway.
bag, and the blocks get cheaper as you turn the wheel, and you can build cities. Simple to learn and play. Lots of depth. Super fun. I think you've probably played it in the
I
past.
have. It's a good game.
It's a great game. Lots of color. Really enjoyed
We
it.
need to do something
Palaces
like-
of Carrara.
Go back, play some of these like throwback games.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely, and that's kind of what my game is too. I went to Grand Con, and Gary joined me up there on Saturday and Sunday in Grand Rapids. Great convention, by the way. And we had a chance. Those conventions are the place where you can actually like sit down and play games that we aren't playing for the show.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were walking through the library, and I saw Seasons, which is one of my favorite games. And Gary's never played it, so I said, "Okay, dude, I'm teaching you Seasons." So we sat down, and you
Oh, that game was
really
How
enjoyed
many
it.
did you guys play? How many people?
Just us
Just-
two of
just
us.
us
That's
two.
the
Yeah.
sweet spot, I think.
I think, yeah.
I have to say, I've not played with 3 too many times. 4 gets to be a bit of a slog
Four
in
is
that
too
game.
many. Yeah.
But
What a super fun game.
Was it just the base game you played?
Just the
or
base
yeah,
game.
in fact, we didn't even play all of the cards. We played the recommended sort of 31 cards. Although we did do the draft, even though he'd never played, because
Yeah.
like I wanted him to experience that, because that's really the biggest part of the game,
Yeah.
even though you had no
That's
idea
just-
what you were doing.
Once you see those cards, now that I've seen the
Yeah.
cards, now I know how to really play. I would never play probably without the advanced, even though I've never played with the advanced cards. But what a fun
Who won?
game.
Oh, I kind of obliterated.
Yeah.
I imagine that's the game you have to
At
have
the
some
end, I was
experience with, for
leading
sure.
well. I was like, hey, I'm doing pretty good here. And here he comes with his stupid
I got
combos.
like 100. It was one of my highest scores, actually. I think I had like 280 points or something.
It was a bad season
It was
for me.
ridiculous. But it was good. It was, for me, it was one of those experiences where, again, like I played a game that I hadn't played probably in a year and a half and thought, man, this is a good game. I need to get this out more often. So
Yeah.
I'm going to definitely pull it out and play with some other people soon.
Yeah, I didn't get to go to Grand Con, so I stayed home and finished the second scenario of Seventh Continent, which
Oh,
is so good. So I've got through 2 of them. I've got
Really?
5 more to go. They're hard. I mean, they're challenging as single-player games. But
Everyone's talking about this now,
it's
too.
so good. It's a fantastic
Well, it's on
game.
Kickstarter now. And
Yeah, I just
it's
backed it. 'cause
exploding.
I missed it the first time. I
Yeah.
was really upset
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, it's been on a lot of different shows. Scott Alden from BGG was on, I forget who, he called into Rich Summers' Cardboard podcast, and Scott was
Yeah,
he's
I'm
going
telling you,
crazy for the
it's
game.
going to be a lot of people's game of the year. Probably mine, too. London from Martin Wallace.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I definitely wanna
I
play
forgot
that.
how good this game was. Osprey just did the re-release of the
beautiful,
game.
too, no?
Brand new artwork. If you guys want to see an old, really crappy review from me from 2011,
really?
I have an old video of it. But the game is so good. You guys have to play this game.
I
London
want
is
to.
a
It looks
fantastic
Yeah, I can't wait to
game.
get it, actually.
Yeah,
You've
that's it,
also-
right?
That's going to be one to get.
I've also played through all of White Goblin's Essen releases, Montana, Bali, and Claim. Montana is kind of a worker placement game by Rudiger Dorn, the guy that did Istanbul and
Yeah.
Karuba. It is a fast game. Oh my goodness. It's a worker placement game, but you're done in about 35, 40 minutes. Much faster than what I anticipated. Claim's a little 2-player trick-taking game, which is really fun. You played that with me.
Yep.
And then I also played Bali, which is a re-implementation of Rapa Nui. It is like a hand management game. It's really fun as well. And then the last one, which we haven't played, but we're playing tonight, is Agra.
Yeah.
And right behind your head, I'm so excited for this game. I took 4 pages of notes going to try to
Just to
teach this
teach
game.
it?
It is a heavy game. It's much heavier than what I anticipated, and I think you guys are going to absolutely love
The
it.
components
We start
look
at midnight.
crazy.
Well, and a lot of people, we've had that box floating around on our sets for a few different videos,
Yes.
and we've gotten comments after comments saying, "Oh,
When are you gonna play
when
Agra?"
When are you going to play Agra? When are you going
Yeah.
to do a review of Agra?" It's coming. We're going to be doing it very, very soon.
Yeah, and
right?
another game that we get asked about a lot is the new game from Mind Clash.
Oh, Cerebria.
Yes.
We plan on playing that Monday. I know that we were supposed to be on the Kickstarter page. Apologize to those guys. We've just been crazy
Yeah.
busy with content. We're going to try to get out a video for that too, so we have it in our possession. We'll get that played as well.
So, and speaking of comments,
Yeah.
we're going to wrap up tonight talking about a few comments that came into us. Looking at my
Timestamp was
phone.
one of them, right?
Yeah, one of them, XYST is the name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, so I just went with the letters. They asked for timestamps. This is simple. We'll add timestamps. There's not too much content in these things. We usually have 3 different categories.
Yep.
So we'll add them. It's simple enough. That'll be there in the description, so check it out for the next time. Next question was from Creepy Shadow. I'm certain I'm pronouncing that one right. They were asking about, they basically suggested a topic of board game cafes and breweries and that sort of thing, which I think we will tackle.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good thing to tackle. Have you guys, I mean, really quickly, have you guys been to one? I mean,
We have a local one here.
Yeah, we have a local one, Kingmakers.
Yeah.
downtown. There's one up in Lafayette, too, that I've been to. There's a nice little cafe, and I don't know if you guys would...
Boards and Brews, I think, is one.
Well, it's
Boards and
not
Brews.
What's the
Books and Brews?
Books and
Books and
Brews,
Brews.
Yeah, Books
which
and
is like a half-price bookstore and a brewery type place.
Right.
But there's a lot of board gaming going on there.
You know, while we're on this, I need to get up to Snakes and Lattes because I hear about that place all the time.
Yeah, I've not seen it or heard of. I've heard of it.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's like that, the epitome of when someone says board game cafe, like, oh, well,
They're
that's the
thinking of
model.
that.
Is
Yeah.
Snakes
Or a
and
Mox.
Lattes.
Yeah, or Mox.
Yeah,
In
or a
Seattle.
Mox, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then the last question was, it wasn't a question, it was a comment. And I'm bringing this up because it'll make for some good discussion. They said Mysterium, best co-op. This was from our conversation last week when we talked about co-ops. A lot of people shared comments like, oh, this co-op's great, this co-op's great. This co-op has a variety of opinions on this panel, so we'll talk about it really briefly before we wrap up. And
Yeah, we probably should have talked about it in the last episode, but I know how viewers feel about us or wanting us to be more vocal about whether we like particular games or just doing negative reviews in general. It's hard for me to talk about it because I mean, I'm not an overly critical person, but I don't like Mysterium. I've never liked the game. I think it's an awful game. If I want to play that style of game, I want to play Dixit, where every player participates as the clue giver, so to speak, within the game. And Mysterium just is, it's so dependent, like so incredibly dependent upon the group that you play with. And I don't feel like the gameplay is there either. I find it very rudimentary and boring.
See, I enjoy the game. All my experiences with Mysterium have been really good. And it does depend on the group for sure. But I'd say a lot of co-ops probably... Many co-ops.
A lot of board
depend
games,
on that
period.
too.
I mean, that's a blanket statement. And
Yeah.
I mean, even playing D&D depends on the group that you're playing with. So that criticism is just my criticism. That's the way I feel
but
about
If
the
you
game.
come at Mysterium from the standpoint, sorry, Ryan, if you come at Mysterium from the standpoint of like really wanting to win and do well, if you don't have a good ghost,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
then it's going to not be a great
It
experience.
cripples the whole game.
However, if you don't come at it from that perspective and think win or lose, this is a experience we're having around a table playing together, then that to me doesn't have a problem, and it just makes for some really funny situations where, like at the end of the game, you're like, "What were you doing?" Like those conversations are fun to have. I think.
Yeah.
Well, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. I'm kind of in the middle because here's the reason why. I
Playing it
always want to.
safe.
I want to be the ghost.
Yeah,
I don't want to play. I don't want to be the guesser. I just want to be
That's
the ghost.
same,
Yeah.
mostly the same mentality in most of those games. Letters from Whitechapel, Fury of
Yeah.
Dracula. You want to be the antagonist.
person.
You want to be the
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
giving out the answers or the clues.
Right.
Or
You
You know
whatnot.
That's
why?
more fun to
You know
me.
why I like
Yeah.
Mysterium? Because it's better than Clue, and there's no roll and move. So,
That's a
Well, there you
bad
go. That's a
reason.
pretty low bar, but anyway.
but if somebody comes and they say, if I have friends that aren't really gamers that say, "Oh, Clue is my favorite game,"
Yeah.
I say, "Well, how about we play Mysterium instead?"
You have friends that have Clue as their favorite game?
I have a friend, and you know who you are if you're watching this video, that would tell me
hilarious.
that Clue is their favorite game. Yes.
Well, next week we'll talk all about Ryan's friends.
Friend.
It's a short list. I kid, Ryan, I kid. But thanks for checking out episode 3 of Chit Chat. Please do all the social media stuff, but most importantly, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do that right now, and we'll catch you next time on Chit Chat.